How'd you get started on guitar?
When I was a teenager, I was a rock and roll musician. I played electric bass in bands in the New England area, and mostly straight rock and roll, but also jazz and fusion bands. I think we were gigging and touring in that area from Albany to Boston and from northern Massachusetts to Norwalk, New York, Connecticut, the whole region, and playing in clubs and bars. And so I had my roots in rock and roll, like so many of us. But little by little started becoming intrigued by the kind of the depth and the richness of classical music. I had heard a few players and gravitated little by little towards that path. There was a point when I decided to major in music in college when I was maybe 16 or so. And I had to decide what instrument to play because I was a bass player when I was a kid. And it seemed to me either sensible to become a double bassist and become an orchestral musician following through on bass, or to become a classical guitarist following through on my guitar experience. And because I was literally a little too nervous about trying to handle a bow, I picked classical guitar. It was that random. So then with classical guitar lessons, started discovering that repertoire, and I never looked back.
You've been a college professor for quite a while now.
Yes.
What are some of the things you're looking for in a prospective student?
When listening to prospective students, you listen for their innate sense of musicianship. You're listening for their sense of rhythm, for the perception of sound. Do they make a beautiful sound? Do they vibrate? Is their vibrato natural? Do they seem to understand the beginning, middle, and end of a phrase? Do they seem to know how to make a musical idea come to life? It doesn't have to be sophisticated. These things can be very, very basic. But if there's a germ of awareness and sort of a natural sense of those kinds of musical skills, then I become very interested. Obviously, I'll look at the students' hands, and if they are being used in a healthful way, that's really important too. It's hard to undo damage of poor training. So students don't have to be very advanced, but they need to have evidence of musicianship. That's really, and also I like to interview the students at some length, and I'm looking for some sense that they are inquisitive, that they're musically curious, that they're enthusiastic about it, that they are really interested in classical music and not maybe just, say, the mechanical or athletic aspects of being an instrumentalist, but more interested in the music itself. I'm interested in how articulate they are in communicating their own ideas, how clear are they about their own potential path in life? Do they sense what this is about when they were to come to major in music in college? It's a big decision. And they don't have to have all the answers, but I was very interested in the kinds of responses I get. So those kinds of questions.
So once those students get to study with you, how do you pick rep form?
Repertoire choice is one of the most interesting and challenging parts of being a teacher. And I find it to be one of the most pleasing puzzles to try to solve as the director of 2 college guitar studios. Obviously, the repertoire has to be interesting and appealing to the student, first and foremost. Second, and equally important, it has to be level-appropriate music. I think the easiest trap to fall into is to permit students to play music that's too difficult. There's plenty of difficult music out there, and sometimes it feels like there isn't quite as much intermediate or early intermediate music of equal interest. So there's a challenge in finding music that's at the right level. But another element of the puzzle for me is to avoid having several students in the studio playing the same works. I don't like hearing the same pieces over and over again during the same, say, period of years. I prefer to avoid that. This prevents the sense of competitiveness in the studio and hearing 2 different interpretations, but also helps the students to become better aware of the range of repertoire out there, and keeps it more interesting for me.
Do you have any standards that you make students play?
Not really. I try to avoid that whole idea of teaching certain standards all the time. I mean, there are war horses of the repertoire which get used a lot. It seems like most students play some Villa-Lobos at one time or another. Everybody plays some Bach at one point or another, but everybody does music from the 19th century. And people always play Latin and Spanish repertoire and contemporary music, but as far as specific works, no.